I'm back in the shed again. I was planning on doing the floor today, but I want to make it out of one piece, and this is all the sheet metal that I have, and that's not enough to make the floor pans out of one piece. So I'm going to start enclosing some of the smaller areas using this sheet metal, and I'm probably going to start trimming out the firewall and clearancing it for the wheels. That way, when I do get some more materials, I can build the floor, which will support the firewall. And then I want to work my way up. So I want to do the floor, get that in place, which will locate the firewall properly. And then that will set the height, and then I can build the top of the firewall and the sides. If I do the sides now and it's a little bit off, it's going to push the floor down or up. And I don't want to do that. And I'll explain that a bit later. So today, I'm just going to get the rear infills built. And I'll see how I go for time. I might make the rear section of the tunnel. I don't know if I'll commit to that just yet, in case I change the dimensions with the floor pan. I'm hopefully going to knock this one out fairly quickly. I need a lot more materials, so I need to buy another sheet of steel and some tube to reinforce the front. And I'm not going to be able to get that done this week, so it might be a quick, short and sweet video. So this is the area I was thinking of working on today. I want to do the infill for here. I think it should be a fairly basic piece. If you remember from the last video, I used this as a template, this bit of ram board. I use that as the template for the firewall. I'm just going to repurpose the cardboard again and make the template for the rear, because I won't need another template for the firewall. What I'm hoping to do once I get some more materials for the floor pan is I want to make it one piece from the rear all the way to the front, and it's going to overlap this bottom flange here, and I'll spot weld them together. And the reason I don't want to start getting the firewall tacked in is because the height of this, so I over bent this, and the height of it is going to be determined with where I put the floor, if I'm going to go on top or underneath. And what that will allow me to do when I have the floor in place is make sure my angles are right on the firewall, and I can build to the firewall from them. So until I get more materials, I'm just going to use clamps to hold the firewall in place. So let's get going. So this is the area I'm going to fill in. I want to work in this area here. I'm just going to do a panel with a fold on it. So the top will be flat and it will fold, and then the floor pan will butt up to it. I think that's a really good idea because it gives me something to spot weld to, and it's going to reinforce this rear wall. I did put this in, which really made it strong. I don't think the reinforcement aspect of it is what's necessary, but it's going to give me somewhere to lay the floor pan on and give it a few spot welds. Spot welds are easy. If I go corner to corner to weld this rear wall to the floor, like if you go to corner, it's a lot more chance of melting away. This is only 1.2 mil thick steel. And when you're MIG welding it, you got to go zap, 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 zap. And if you got to do that to seal it, you've got this whole wall you'd have to weld up. By pressing it up, which is what car manufacturers do, is you can overlap the panels, and as long as you put a sealer primer in between them, a few spot welds is actually just as strong. And you don't have to spend a day tacking it along and grinding it back to make it look pretty. You have a nice fold, couple of spot welds, done. Bit of seam sealer if you're really fussed, and it's done. You've got a sealed cabin with minimal work. So that's what I'm going to do for this. I'm just going to do them in 2 pieces, and then when I get more material, as I said earlier, I'll work my way forward to the firewall. That will set the height. Bob's your uncle, and Fanny's your aunt, apparently. So the plan is I'm going to go across the back here. I bought these off Temu because it's real hard pulling the other magnets apart. So I thought, hey, I'll get some of these little hooks. And I don't know, they're like $3. You can't complain. I did buy these from the hardware store. A few weeks ago, I paid $12 a box. So yeah, good old Temu coming through. So what I'll do, I'll cut it a bit longer than I need. Beautiful. So with a lot of the flanges I'm going to put on all this sheet metal, I'm just going for a 25mm flange. I think that's the maximum I can get out of my bender. If I go any shorter, the bender doesn't like it and it pulls away, and then you end up with an uneven bend. So I'm just going to go 25mm on all the flanges that I end up bending, just because that works. Ideally, I'd like to only have like a 10mm flange, but I don't have the equipment to bend it that tight and that short of a flange. So, and I did say flange about 16 times, and sorry. What I'm going to do now is measure the height from the top of this box section down, and then I'll add 25mm for the flange. So we've got approximately 100. It's actually a little bit less than 100. So I'm going to just call it 100. Mark it out on here. I'll trim the cardboard down. That way I have a bit less material to deal with. And then I can start getting the contour of the what do you call that? The tunnel, the transmission tunnel, yeah. So I'm going to do that. I'll trim this, and then I'll use my magnets to hold it in place. Make sure it's going to work. I think I've got to do another template for the other side because it's a different length. But let me get that going. So I've got them all trimmed and pressed up, or folded up I should say. So I'm going to trim it around the transmission tunnel now, and then if I'm going to leave it, so if it's too long, I'd rather cut this end nice and square than try and trim it to the right length at that end. So the best course of action is to get your profile around that tunnel and then sit it in place. If it's too long, you're better off cutting the square edge as opposed to cutting that profile. So here's the profile I've ended up with. You get the idea of what I was saying about the flange. you imagine this is the floor pan, I can sit it directly on top. I drill a couple of holes through the floor pan and spot weld it straight through onto the frame. The profile fits up perfect. You can see there's a little bit of daylight, but it's minute. I'm just going to fill it with weld, it should be fine. The profile actually matches the other side. So what I'm going to do is make the same panel but reverse it. And I should be able to get both pieces knocked up together. I might run a bead through it. I'm not sure if I don't need a bead for strength, but I don't know. I've got the bead rollers out and may as well use them. Although, it might be a waste of time. We'll see. I wish I had the metal to do the floor, but what do you do? This is what I've got so far. Didn't feel the need to video me cutting all this. It's quite repetitive. So, we've got, I used the template backwards, and we have a mirror image of each other. That's driver's side, that's passenger side. I'm going to trim the transmission tunnel out, or the area for the transmission tunnel out, and then I'm going to give it a fold. Then I'm going to work out if I'm going to put a bead roll in it. So I've got it all marked out to do a bit of bead rolling and pressing right there. I'm going to fold it along that line. This right here is the bead roll line on both of them. I'm just doing one bead roll. Not necessary at all. I'm going to press it in. Or I should say out. It's going to be facing outside the cab. So I've still got a flat panel. I'm going to use my little, this little bead roller here. I'm just going to do the one bead and then I'll put it in my little DIY pan brake. And I'll get it pressed in and then we can sit it in the truck and see what it looks like. So when you're doing this sort of thing, repetition is the key here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to set up this little guide. It's a adjustable guide. I'll set it up on my mark. So I'm going to use the bead roller or the dies to hold the plate temporarily. And then I'll push up the guide. I'll tighten it up a little bit. So, got to pay attention to how you want your beads because you can put it on the wrong side of the panel. So I want the indent to face outside the truck. So I've marked it out, I've double checked it. And now I've got it on my stop line or my start line. It could be either or. So what you do is touch your die down, okay? So that is 0. And I'm going to go down 1 full revolution on my tensioner. And then I'll bead roll it. Making sure that I'm still touching the guide. Even though the guide's still here, I have in the past gone off track a little bit. So pay attention to how you're feeding it into the machine. Go nice and slow. My bead roller is moving around on me, which is no good. I could have probably done it at half a turn for this, but that's fine. I'll make it work. And I've seen people put like a big hand wheel on these. I'd love to do something like down the track, but this is what I've got and this is what I'll use. Just take your time, nice and slow. and stop it right on your mark. Perfect, I'm happy with that. And you end up with a nice bead through your panel, nice and clean. This should give it a little bit more rigidity, but doing the fold line on it's going to give it plenty of rigidity too. So this is kind of, I'm practicing for when I do the floor pan, because I'd like to add a lot more bead rolling into the floor pan. So pay attention to where your die is, or your guide. So I've come down 50 mil. So if I had put it in this way, it won't be in the right spot. So just pay attention to what you're doing. I'm no pro, but I'll tell you what, fake it till you make it. So I know that's touchdown and then one full revolution. And I'll end up with the same result on both panels then. And when you do bead rolling, it's better to do multiple passes if you want a deeper bead. Trying to do it in one hit can sometimes lead to problems where if you're doing radius beads or around the corner with too much tension on it, it can be very stop-starty and unequal, which you'll get to see a bit more of that in the next video with the floor pan. So same depth, same profile, nice small bead. And that's the result of it. So now I can press it or bend it up. What I need to do now is trim a little bit off here to allow the panel to drop down a bit. You don't need to go crazy with it. A little bit at a time. You can do it with your tin snips, or you can do it with a die grinder or a grinder. I'm just going to use the tin snips, and then I'll clean it up with the grinder once I know the panel's close to fitting. Alright, I'm kind of happy with where that's sitting. So now this side. I'll bring you in a bit closer and show you what I'm doing with this side. And then you'll get a better understanding of what I've done on that side. Okay, you see the gap up top. This is two options here. I can either trim it down a bit and push it in. I'll end up with a gap. Or the option I'm doing, which is what I've done on the other side, is I'm actually, you can see those ripples in the bottom flange, that's from shrinking it. So I'm going to shrink the flange, which puts a curve in it. Because you imagine you want this flange shorter, which will bring the panel in this way. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to put it in the shrinker, do a little bit of shrinking on it, and I'll show you what that looks like after it's had the shrink done. You don't need to do much. It's probably going to only come in about 60-70 mil, which will be enough to allow this panel to push back into the cab, and then I won't have a big gap to fill in, because you've got to remember all these gaps have to get filled in. So this is what I managed to get done today. I don't have much time in the shed, so this is all I could get done. So I have made these two rear panels. I've quickly hit it with the flap disc. Obviously there's a couple of ripples there from the shrinker. I'm not too worried about it. It's a rat rod, it's a patina truck, it's not perfect. Believe it or not, this truck here wasn't the highest quality truck when they built it, so I think it's fine. So this is what I've done. Ooh. You can see there, this is what I was talking about earlier about the shrinker stretcher. What I've done is shrink the panel, and you'll see, you can kind of see there what the shrinker does. It bends the flange, you can see, oh, that shows it a lot better. So I was able to bend the flange around to match the profile of the cab. That's the beautiful thing about the shrinker stretcher, it does that. So now, as you can see, when this panel is properly pushed in, it's actually going to seal quite nice against the cab. So what I'll do is I'll prep this area up when I start the welding process, and I'll just give it a couple little stitches there and a bit of seam sealer, and this part will be done. And then the idea with this panel is to clamp. So once I tack it to the box section, I'll be able to run a few stitch welds I should say, corner to corner. It's less than ideal, but it'll work, and that's going to seal the cab from the weather and stuff like that. And it's trimmed up around the tunnel. So the next thing that will happen is probably going to be the floor pan in the tunnel. I need to figure out a way that I'm going to bend this tunnel up. The bead rolls are nice. I'm happy with how they turned out. Look, it's a good panel for what it is. Alright guys, this is where I'm wrapping this one up. I've got the infills done. In the next video, you're going to see me do the floor pans. Thank you for watching,